Hi guys, welcome to Studental. I am Dr. Manjiri Deshmukh, your mentor for today in the subject of public health dentistry. Our topic for today is research methodology. What exactly is research? Anything and everything what we know today, what is known to the mankind today, even the smallest bit of information like maybe the invention of an electric bulb, or how Columbus discovered the United States of America, or maybe the complex genetic composition of human body, that is the composition of DNA or RNA. So every little thing which we know of today has been possible through consistent, diligent research of some kind of researcher, investigator or scholar. So what kind of set rules do they follow for doing a particular kind of research is what constitutes our research methodology. So what is the definition of research? As given by WHO in their book of health research methodology, research is defined as a quest for knowledge through diligent search or investigation or experimentation aimed at the discovery and interpretation of new knowledge. So whatever steps we take for finding out about any new kind of information, new kind of knowledge is research. And what are the steps which lead us to a proper research goal constitute the research methodology. So what is research methodology? It is a way to systematically solve the research problem. It may be understood as a science of studying how research is done systematically. So basically, what are the steps which are involved in doing a particular kind of research is research methodology. So you ought to have some basic foundation for doing particular kind of research. You need to have the foundation of evidence-based literature review, and you need to follow scientifically sound study designs. So what are the different kinds of research, or what is the classification of research? The first classification is basic versus applied. Second classification is observational versus experimental. Third is qualitative versus quantitative. Fourth is conceptual versus empirical, and last is health research triangle. Now we will see each of these in detail. What exactly are each of these? So first classification is basic versus applied research. So basic research is also called pure or fundamental research. It is a search for knowledge without a defined goal of utility or a specific purpose. So basically, you just want to know the answer in a yes or no without knowing further details about any particular kind of topic is your basic research. Like the anxiety of child towards dentist, you want to find out if a child is anxious towards dentist or he is not. So that is the end of it. You just want to find out the answer, whether it is a yes or a no. You do not want to find about what is the etiology of anxiety, or what are the treatment plans which are involved in keeping away that anxiety. You are interested just in a yes or no. That is your basic research. Whereas applied research is problem oriented, and it is directed towards a defined and purposeful end. It is done based on a perceived need and helps in solving an existing problem. So if we take the same example of anxiety in children towards dentist, in basic research we'll just want to find out whether the child is anxious or he is not. In applied research, you will want to know the reasons for anxiety and what are the treatment options which are involved for curing that curing that anxiety. Next is observational research and experimental research. So what is observational research? Observational research is we just observe what is naturally going on around us and we document it. Like there are different growth patterns of maxilla and mandible. We just observe the different growth patterns of maxilla and mandible without any additional intervention or without any manipulation of the naturally going on procedure. You just observe it and you just document it. That is your observational research. Second is experimental research. In this experimental research, in a naturally going on procedure, we apply our own intervention or our own manipulation, and then we observe what are the results. Like an example of observational research will be study on various growth patterns, like for consider the maxilla and mandible. We just observe the various growth patterns of maxilla and mandible, that is your observational research. Whereas in experimental research, we study the appliances that bring in growth modulation, like say the chin cup, face mask, the different interventions, the different appliances which bring in changes in the growth modulation. That is your experimental research. You apply an external intervention in a naturally going on procedure and then you see and document the results. Next is qualitative research. Anything which cannot be quantified, which cannot be given in numbers or numerical values, is your qualitative research. So it deals with the subjective aspects which are qualitative in nature and which are difficult to quantify, like the research on patient satisfaction after treatment. You cannot give a particular number to it, you cannot quantify it. It will be like say high, moderate or low kind of thing. So it can be a scale kind of thing, but it will not be a definite numerical value. Second is quantitative research. It is based on the measurement of quantity or amount. So it involves variables which can be definitely quantified, and this quantitative research is considered to be more valid as compared to your qualitative research. It is considered to be more scientifically sound. Example of quantitative research is study on the prevalence of malocclusion, or for that matter any other dental condition in a particular area. Next is conceptual research versus empirical research. Conceptual research is research which is related to some abstract idea or theory. So basically this involves only a pen and paper. The researcher, some idea strikes the mind of the researcher and just he documents it without doing any experiment, without justifying whether it will be valid or not. He just pens it down. Whereas empirical research is the research in which experience or observation alone are the tools of research. So basically empirical research involves getting your hands dirty. What is the conceptual research? You need to work on it, you need to experience it, you need to observe it, and then you need to prove and document it. That is your empirical research. You need to get your hands dirty, you need to work on a conceptual idea to convert it into an empirical kind of research. So next is health research triangle. So the three apices of the health research triangle are found by biomedical, health services and behavioral. This health research triangle is a very commonly asked SAQ. So what are these three things? First is biomedical research. So this biomedical research primarily deals with the basic research involving processes at the cellular level, like the basic things, meiosis, mitosis kind of things, or the DNA, RNA. So biomedical research deals with the cellular level. Next is health services research. So it deals with the issues in the environment surrounding man which promotes changes at the cellular level. So the environmental changes or the environmental incidents which lead to changes at cellular level, at genetic level, that involves the health services research. Like if we want to take an historic example, the atomic bomb attacks on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, they led to genetic changes in almost the entire population residing in those areas at that particular time. So that is the health services research. Or the external factors which lead to changes at cellular level, at genetic level, and which will affect the next generations to come, that will come under your health services research. Next is behavioral research. It deals with the interaction of the man and the environment in a manner reflecting the benefits, attitudes and practices of the individuals in the society. So basically the knowledge, attitude, practices kind of questionnaire studies which we usually deal with, which are commonly done. The easiest kind of research, that is your behavioral research, like anxiety in dental students, anxiety in pediatric patients, etc. etc. So what exactly is the scheme of research, or what are the different steps involved in a particular research? First is idea. Obviously the first thing is some idea has to strike the mind of the investigator. Then you frame the research problem, then you frame the research question, then you frame the hypothesis. We will see in the upcoming slides what hypothesis exactly is. Then we go for the literature review. That is, obviously we have to base our research on the past studies which have been conducted on similar kind of topic, not exactly the same, but we have to go through those research, studies. We have to take base or foundation from those. So literature review is very important. Next is pilot trial. So what is pilot trial? Pilot trial can be called as the miniature version of the bigger study which you are going to conduct, and it is done on a smaller sample size. Suppose you are conducting a study, your main study involves around 200 individuals. You will conduct your pilot trial on say around 20-25 individuals or study subjects. So what exactly is the need for this pilot trial? Pilot trial, first is you need to know the economic and practical feasibility of that study, which you get to know by conducting the pilot trial. There can be standardization of the instrument which can be done with the help of pilot trial, and you know the various difficulties which you will be coming with. If your if your research instrument is a questionnaire, then you give it to a miniature version, like say 20 individuals. Few of them ask you questions, few of them tell you what doubts arise in their minds when they are filling up that questionnaire. Then obviously you can correct that questionnaire before you start your main study. So that is the pilot trial, and that becomes your standardization of the instrument. In this case, the instrument is the questionnaire. Okay. So next is protocol writing and submission to IRB. You complete the entire protocol writing, how are you going to do about the research, and then you submit it to the institutional review board for approval. Next is design and conduct of the study. After it is approved by the IRB, you have to conduct the research following proper study designs. Then there are tabulation of observations, obviously when you are conducting the study, analysis and presentation of the results, statistical analysis and graphical representation of the results. Then there is interpretation, drawing conclusions, and then the research publication, which is the most important thing, because if you keep on doing research and keep it to yourself, it is of no use. So research publication is a very important thing. The world needs to know what new thing you have found out by conducting the research. So what is hypothesis? Like one of the steps in the scheme of research was hypothesis formulation. So what exactly is a hypothesis? So hypothesis is defined as a presumption, supposition or assumption derived either out of observation or reflection, or they can be called as carefully constructed statements about a phenomena in the population or in the human body with reference to a treatment. So basically it is not a haphazard guesswork. It is a assumption which you make at the beginning of your research or at the beginning of your study, based on the old literature review and based on what you anticipate from your particular kind of research. So you, before the beginning of the study, you have a particular picture in your mind based on which you formulate your hypothesis. Like for example, if you the study which you are conducting is which of the two mouthwashes is better or more effective. So maybe based on the previous research, you can say that there is no difference in the efficacy of these two mouthwashes, or maybe one mouthwash is better than another. So this is a kind of anticipated result which you frame in your mind before the conduct of the study. So these need to be very specific. So these are the examples of hypothesis. It is not just that carbohydrates cause dental caries or consumption of sugar causes dental caries. The hypothesis needs to be very, very specific, like what quantity of sugar, what per day causes caries amounting to what, like DMFT score of it, of what, and in how much percentage of the population, and how, in what age of population, and after how many years of exposure. So you need to have multiple variables in your hypothesis, which all you are going to study in your main research. So these all things need to be a part of your hypothesis. It cannot be just a haphazard or very vague kind of thing like carbohydrates cause dental caries. Similar example, smoking 30 to 40 cigarettes per day causes lung cancer in 10% of the smokers after 20 years of exposure. So it is this specific. It is not just that smoking causes lung cancer. You have to be very specific in the terminologies, in the variables which you are using in your hypothesis. So there are two different kinds of hypothesis: null hypothesis and research or alternative hypothesis. So what is null hypothesis? This is used when the researcher believes there is no relationship or no difference between the two variables which the investigator is testing. So example is daily consumption of refined sugars is not associated with the rise in caries experience. Obviously this is not true, but supposedly if you consider, the investigator is considering that at the end of the study his conclusion will be daily consumption of refined sugars is not associated with the rise in caries experience, then this is your null hypothesis, because the investigator is assuming there will be no difference. Or second is when you consider that there is no relationship or no difference. Second is, example is, there is no difference in the efficacy of two different mouthwashes. Supposedly you are studying the difference between the chlorhexidine and herbal mouthwash. You anticipate that there will be no difference in the efficacy of these two mouthwashes. They will be exactly same in their efficacy. Then that is again your null hypothesis. And research or alternative hypothesis, it states the relationship between the variables. When the investigator considers that one variable will be better than another, or there is a specific relationship between two different variables under question, then that will be your research or alternative hypothesis. Like one mouthwash is more effective than other, or daily consumption of refined sugars is associated with rise in caries experience. Exactly opposite than the null hypothesis. So what is your what are the various things which need to be involved in your protocol which you submit to the institutional review board? So protocol is a document that explicitly states the reasoning behind and the structure of your research project. So it needs to be very specific for it to be to get approval by your IRB. So what all it needs to contain? First and most important is the why thing, that is what are the aims and objectives of your study. So what is the difference between aim and objective? Usually aim is only one, that is the ultimate goal which you want to achieve through your research, that is your aim. And objective, it can be called as the means to achieve those achieve that aim. They can be multiple. Like suppose your study is about to know the difference between the efficacy of two different mouthwashes. Again consider herbal and chlorhexidine mouthwash. So this is your aim, to know the efficacy of chlorhexidine and comparative evaluation of the efficacy of chlorhexidine and herbal mouthwash. So to know the comparative evaluation, you need to know the individual efficacy of these two mouthwashes. So your first objective will be to know the efficacy of chlorhexidine mouthwash. Your second will be to know the efficacy of herbal mouthwash, and third will be your comparative evaluation. So these are the steps involved. These are the 3 steps involved which you need to do to reach your aim. So that is the difference between aim and objective. So and there is an acronym which is associated with your aim. Aim should always be SMART, that is specific, measurable, attainable, relevant and time bound. SMART. Specific, measurable, attainable, relevant and time bound. Okay, so next is how you are going to go about the study. So what is your study design, what is the rationale involved behind the conduct of the study, and what are the various instruments or techniques which you are going to use in your study. Next is who. So what is your who all will be a part of your study? The target population, the study population and the sample size. So what is target population, what is study population and what is sample size? See, target population is the population to which you are going to extrapolate your results to. Study population is the population on which you are actually going to conduct your study, and sample size is what are the number of subjects which are involved in your study population. Okay, so for example I can give you, suppose the topic of the study is to know the anxiety levels in BDS students in one particular college. So one particular college at one particular time will have around say 550-600 students. If you feel that the budget of your project is not too high, you cannot conduct the study on the entire population, then you have to consider a smaller group. So the entire population is of these 550-600 students is your target population. So the results which you get while conducting the study on your study population will be extrapolated or will be generalized to your target population. Okay, so that is the difference between study population and target population. Study population is the part of target population, and target study population will represent the entire target population. Okay, sample size is the number of individuals who are going to be a part of your study. What is next is what, that is what are the variables and what are the outcomes which you are expecting, what variables you are going to measure when you are going to conduct your study, and what are the different outcomes. So what is the expected significance of results and contribution to specific knowledge. You need to press if that some new kind of information is going to be brought to the fore by your particular kind of research, so that it gets easily approved by your IRB. So what are the different study designs? Under observational, there comes two headings, descriptive and analytical. Under descriptive, there can be case report series, cross-sectional study, longitudinal study. Under analytical, there will be case control or retrospective study, and cohort or prospective study. And second is experimental, which includes your randomized controlled trials. So these are the various study designs which need to be discussed and finalized upon before the start of your study. So these clinical trials or the randomized control trials, they are considered to be the most scientifically sound and most evidence-based kind of research. So the results which you get using these clinical trials can be very easily or very conveniently extrapolated to your target population. Cohort studies, case control studies and descriptive studies are considered to be less specific, less scientifically sound as compared to the clinical trials. So you will look into each of these study designs when we cover the epidemiology. So this is the evidence-based pyramid, which tells you that though the peak is found by meta-analysis, systemic reviews, which are out of scope for UG syllabus, you need to know that randomized control trials, which forms the fourth in this, they are considered the most scientifically sound type of research studies, and systematic reviews and meta-analysis, which form the peak of this evidence-based pyramid, they are formulated by studying these randomized control trials which are conducted earlier. So it is kind of summary of many randomized control trials on a particular topic. So that constitutes your systematic reviews and meta-analysis. You need not go into the details of it. Just know the case control, cohort, descriptive and randomized control trials very well. So next is sampling. Sampling is a very important LAQ question when it comes to your final year papers. So what exactly is sampling? So information on population can be collected by two ways, census method or sample method. So census, as you all know, it is involving the entire population. Obviously when it comes to research, we cannot involve the entire population, we need to go for sample method. Okay. So sample is considered as a part of a population called the universe, reference or target population. So your whole is the universe or reference or target population and part is sample. So sample is your study population on which you are going to conduct the study and which will be extrapolated, which will be generalized to the entire target population after drawing conclusions. So sampling is basically the process of selecting part from the whole. It is the process or technique of selecting a sample of appropriate characteristics and adequate size. Like we can take the similar example of knowing the say anxiety levels in UG students or BDS students. You cannot study, suppose you take the example of Maharashtra, you want to know the stress levels in dental students across Maharashtra. There will be thousands of students which you cannot involve. So you decide upon the particular number which you need to incorporate in your study. So that will be your sample, and your target population will be the entire population of BDA students studying in Maharashtra. And sampling procedure is the process of how you select this part from your target population, from your whole of target population. So what are the different advantages of sampling? Obviously, because you are not considering the entire population, it will save time, it will save cost, and it will save manpower. It allows thorough investigation of the units of the observation, because you have to deal with lesser number of study subjects. Obviously, you will give time, and you will do thorough investigation of whoever study subjects you are examining. There will be greater accuracy of results, obviously, because the workload is less. There will be greater adaptability, and there will be greater feasibility. Just these all things come with the lessened work burden as compared to examining the entire population. Next is, what are the ideal requirements of sampling? Efficiency. The sample should be efficient enough. Whatever study subjects you are involving, they should be cooperative enough. Representativeness, they should represent the target population. Like suppose your target population is BDA students, you have to involve only BDA students in your study population so that they represent the target population. Measurability, obviously they should be measurable. They should be optimum size. The sample size should not be too large to compromise on the feasibility, and they should not be too small to compromise on the generalizability of the results. There should be adequate coverage. It should be goal oriented. There should be feasibility, and it should be economic and cost effective. So what are the different sampling methods? Sampling methods can be broadly classified under two heads: probability or random or non-purposive sampling, and the second is non-probability or non-random or deliberate sampling. So this probability or random sampling is considered to be more scientifically sound, more genuine, more authentic kind of sampling, because every subject has an equal chance of getting recruited in the study. So there is no, you cannot say no, there is less bias involved. And second is non-probability or non-random or deliberate sampling. This can be considered as a less genuine, less scientifically sound kind of sampling, because it is somewhat based on the discretion of the investigator. So what are the different types of probability or random sampling? Simple or unrestricted random sampling, systematic sampling, stratified sampling, cluster sampling, multi-stage sampling, and multi-phase sampling. Non-random sampling involves quota sampling, purposive or judgmental sampling, convenience or accidental or haphazard sampling, snowball or chain sampling, and voluntary sampling. So what is non-probability or non-random sampling? It does not involve random selection, therefore there are more chances of bias involved. So it may or may not represent the population well, because obviously the investigator's judgment, investigator's discretion was involved. He may be a little biased. So it may or may not represent the population well. Used when the researcher lacks a sampling frame for the population. So what is sampling frame? Sampling frame is the list of the entire target population. Like say, again if I take the example of studying the anxiety levels in dental students across Maharashtra, you need to have, if you have a list of all the BDA students across Maharashtra, then that will be your sampling frame, and from that you can consider the sampling. Usually for big large scale studies you do not have a sampling frame. So this is used when researcher lacks a sampling frame for the population, often used in qualitative research. Usually in quantitative research we would usually prefer to do random kind of sampling. So non-probability or non-probability sampling, the different methods are: First is accidental or convenience or haphazard sampling. So this is matter of taking what you get, like the convenience sampling, what you conveniently get, you take it. Example, the easiest example can be about the news reporters who interview everyone whom they easily get on the roads. They question whom they get on the roads. So that is your convenience sampling. Second is voluntary sampling. The sampling, this voluntary sampling is the sample self-selects himself. That is, the investigator puts on a general appeal that I am conducting this and this kind of study, and I need study subjects of this kind. Whoever want to volunteer, they can please contact me. So that is voluntary sampling. Those who want to be a part of the study will get self-selected as a result of a general appeal by the investigator. Next is purpose of sampling. So sampling with a purpose or specific group in mind. Suppose you are dealing particularly with say tobacco chewers, then you have that particular idea, particular target group in the mind, and you select only those. So this is also known as judgmental sampling. Next is quota sampling. So here people are selected non-randomly according to some fixed quota. That is, the investigator pre-decides on a quota. Suppose you consider similar study. Knowing about see the anxiety levels in dental students across Maharashtra. So in Maharashtra, it is not that only the native of Maharashtra will be studying. They can be from outside states as well. So the investigator, to even out the study, the investigator pre-decides that though he is conducting the study in Maharashtra to know the fatigue levels or say anxiety levels in dental students, some 20% will be of his population should be of students who are not native to Maharashtra. So that is your pre-decided criteria before you start the study, so that you even out, there is you lessen the bias which will be involved if you just do the judgmental kind of sampling. Okay. Next is snowball or chain sampling. So it begins by identifying someone who meets the criteria for inclusion in the study, and then you identify one individual, and that one individual, by considering your inclusion criteria in the study, he will recommend others who he knows, so that they may be a part of the study. So this snowball or chain sampling is usually used for hard to track population, like say the drug addicts. One drug addict tends to know the other drug addict more. So this is usually used for hard to track population, so that you get to know one, he will recommend the next one, the next one will recommend the third one, and that way the chain goes on. That is why it is called chain sampling. So why it is called snowball sampling? So when the snowball starts falling down from the peak of the snow-capped mountain, it is usually very small in size. As it slides down the mountain, it accumulates more snow around itself, and by the time it reaches the base of the mountain, it is very big. So that is the analogy. When you start, it is only a one study subject. When you reach the end of the sampling, you will get multiple ones. Next is the second classification, the second head under your classification, that is your probability sampling. Probability or random sampling. So this utilizes some form of random selection. So each unit in the population has an equal chance or probability of being chosen for the sample. So there are less chances as of bias as compared to your non-random sampling. So the procedures should assure that the different units in the population have equal probabilities of being chosen, so that the results you get are bias free and they can be easily or conveniently extrapolated or generalized to the target population. Generalization of results is more acceptable with this random sampling. So what are the different types of probability sampling methods? First, most commonest is the simple or unrestricted random sampling. A sample selected is such that each and every item in the population has an equal chance of being chosen. So what are the steps involved? You first prepare a sampling frame. Sampling frame, as I told you, is the list of individuals of the target population. Second is decide on the size of the sample, that is what will be your sample size. Suppose your target population is of say 1000, you need to decide on the sampling frame, that is you will consider around say 400 students, then this will be your sample size. Sampling frame will be the list of the entire population, that is these 1000 study subjects. Your sample size will be say 400, and then you select the required number of units by table of random numbers or by lottery methods. Table of random numbers, it is a computer software which helps you in randomly selecting the study subjects, and lottery method is the normal chit method. You assign a particular number to each of the study subject and then you pick up those chits, and by lottery method you will select these 400 study subjects, for example. Okay, so this is the most commonest, most easiest random sampling method. Next is stratified random sampling. When the population is heterogeneous with respect to the characteristic under study. Like suppose you are conducting study on about dental caries in a particular district, say, then it will be a very heterogeneous population involving different age groups. Then in these kind of situations, you make the groups homogeneous by dividing them. You make one homogeneous group, you make different homogeneous groups based on the age criteria, like say 0 to 12 will be one group, this will be a homogeneous group. Next will be say 12 to 24, next, so in a similar pattern you will make homogeneous subgroups called strata based on certain common characteristics, like in a present example the characteristic was age, and then you do random or systematic random sampling on these stratum rather than individual study subjects. Okay, so what is systematic sampling? Systematic or quasi-random sampling, so it is obtained by selecting one unit at random and then selecting additional units at evenly spaced intervals till the required sample size is reached. So you have the entire sampling frame, you randomly decide on one number. Suppose by lottery method you will decide on the number 3. So you will decide every third individual in your sampling frame, that is every nth individual in your sampling frame is decided or is selected upon. Okay, like if you randomly get this number 3, you will select every third individual in your sampling frame, that is your systematic or quasi-random sampling. You will select the third one, then the sixth one, then the ninth one, and so on. Okay, so this is your systematic or quasi-random sampling. Next is multi-stage sampling. It is usually used in large-scale investigations involving the entire country. Usually the countrywide investigations use multi-stage sampling. The first stage is to select the groups or clusters, then subsamples are drawn randomly in as many subsequent stages as necessary to obtain the desired sample size. Okay. Next is your example of this multi-stage sampling will be, suppose randomly 4 states have been selected from the entire country. Then of those 4 states you select 2 districts randomly. Then of each of these two districts you select 1 taluka randomly, and of this each taluka of each district you select 3 villages each, and then you examine the stool samples of all persons. So because the study cannot be conducted on the entire population of the country, you have to have a population which will be a representative sample. So this is the way you reach to your desired sample size in as many subsequent stages and without the involvement of any kind of bias. Next is multi-phase sampling. So multi-phase sampling, here Part of the information is collected from the whole sample and part from the subsample. So basically it is adopted when the interest is in any specific disease, like the example is of tuberculosis. You want to study the prevalence of tuberculosis or the incidence of tuberculosis in one particular village, but doing the sputum examination of everyone is obviously beyond the scope, or it will be a very big, very lengthy procedure, very time consuming, very funding dependent procedure. So what you do is you do the Mantox test on all persons in the village, because this is considered to be the most inexpensive, most non-invasive kind of test for TB. Then of all those who get their Mantox test positive, you conduct the X-ray test, and of all those who have the X-ray test positive, you do the sputum examination. So this way, part of the information is collected from the whole sample, and then the subsequent information is drawn from the subsamples who are more likely to qualify the inclusion criteria of your study. Next is cluster sampling. So this is used when the population forms natural groups or clusters. Unlike the stratified sampling technique, wherein you make the investigator has to make the groups or the clusters or the strata, here in cluster sampling you use the population which have already formed their natural groups or clusters, like a particular village or children in a particular school or the wards, etc. So here a simple random sampling is selected, not of individual subjects but of cluster of individuals. So sampling units are the clusters, and sampling frame is the list of these clusters. Usually the sampling frame will be the list of the entire population, whereas in this cluster sampling, the sampling frame will be the list of these naturally forming clusters, and of these clusters you do the simple random sampling. So we will end our topic for research methodology, the first part today. In the next session we will continue about the different types of data, the methods of collection of data, and what are the different graphical representation of the data, and that will complete your research methodology. One thing I would like to tell you is that biostatistics, epidemiology and biostatistics, epidemiology and research methodology, they are very closely related topics, and hence they need to be studied maybe you can say concurrently. So whenever you are studying these topics, make sure that you refer, when you are studying research methodology, you get the mention of the different study designs. Go to the epidemiology chapter and there study the epidemiological study designs as well, so that both the concepts will be clear. Here sampling is a very important LEQ question, so you need to know all the sampling techniques, maybe of random as well as the non-random sampling technique. Okay? So in the next session we'll cover the data. Thank you. Have a good day.